Hi everybody. First I want to apologize for not being there today. My son has a fever, so he could not go to his nanny. So I appreciate you following along this way. Alright, so we're going to talk about matrix multiplication today. So to get started, in order to multiply matrices, the columns of the first matrix have to match the rows of the second. Okay, so columns of the first have to equal the rows of the second. Okay, and the dimensions of that product matrix is going to be rows of the first by columns of the second. So for instance, if we had a matrix and we were multiplying two matrices, one matrix was a 2 by 3 and the other was a 3 by 5. And we're multiplying these two matrices together. The first thing I would look for is, okay, do these middle dimensions match? So that's the columns of the first and the rows of the second. Since they do, then I can look to the outsides, the rows of the first and the columns of the second. So the product, the matrix dimensions are going to be, the product is going to be a 2 by 5. Okay, so let's take a look at this first example of multiplying matrices. So multiplication in terms of matrices is a combination of multiplying and adding together. All right, so let's take a look at this first example. And what I like to do is I circle the rows of the first guy, okay? And I circle the columns of the second. And these all better have the same amount of elements that I'm circling, okay? So let's just look at the dimensions of these, okay? So this first matrix is a 3 by 2. Okay, 3 rows, 2 columns. The second matrix is a 2 by 4. Okay, 2 rows and 4 columns. So I check, okay, these two match, therefore I can find the product. So our new dimensions will be a 3 by 4. So that's good to keep in mind as we go through and multiply these two matrices. Okay, so let's go ahead and multiply these and see what we get. Okay, so as I mentioned, matrix multiplication is a combination of multiplying and adding. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take our first element and multiply it by the first element in the first column. Okay, so we're going to have 2 times 1. Okay, and then we're going to go on to the next element in that circle. Okay, so we're going to take 3 times negative 1. So we're going to add that product to it. So 3 times negative 1. So this is row 1 times column 1, and it's going to go in row 1, column 1 of our product matrix. Okay, so now we're going to take row 1 and multiply it by row 2. Okay, so first element times first element, so that's going to be 2 times 2, plus second element times second element, so that's going to be 3 times 0. Okay, so now we're going to take row 1 and multiply by column 3. All right, so this can be tedious, but bear with me. So first element times first element, 2 times negative 2, plus second element, 3 times second element, 3. Okay, and now finally, row 1 times column 4. Okay, so same idea here. So first element, 2 times first element, 3, plus second element, 3 times second element of negative 4. And we'll clean this up, okay? But now we've taken care of that first row. So now we need to go through this for row 2 and row 3, okay? So let's look at row 2 times column 1. All right, so row 2 times column 1 is going to be negative 3 times 1 plus 1 times negative 1. First element times first element, second element times second element. Now we're going to do row 2 times column 2. So negative 3 times 2 plus 1 times 0. Okay? Now we're going to do row 2 times column 3. So we have first element negative 3 times first element negative 2 plus second element of 1 times second element of 3. Okay? And now finally we're looking at that second row times the fourth column, and we get negative 3 times 3 plus 1 times negative 4. Okay? Alright, so that's taken care of the first 2 rows, but now we need to go through and do the same thing for this third row. So row 3 times column 1, then row 3 times column 2, then row 3, column 3, and row 3, column 4. Okay? So here we go. So we have first element of 1 times first element of 1 plus second element, so negative 3 times second element of negative 1. So that's row 1, column 1. Now row 1, column 2. So we have 1 times 2 plus negative 3 times 0. Row 3, column 3. So we have 1 times negative 2 plus a negative 3 times 3. And then finally, row 3 times column 4. So we have 1 times 3 plus a negative 3 times negative 4. And now we just need to clean up each element. So what you should see is that we've got ourselves a 3x4 matrix, which is what we said our product was going to be. So now we just have to clean up each element, and when we do that, we'll get our final answer. So our final answer is going to be our row 1, column 1, 2 times negative 3, that'll give us negative 1. Row 1, column 2, that's going to be 4. Row 1, column 3, that should get us to 5. Negative 4 plus 9. And then row 1, column 4 is going to be 6 minus 12, so we should get a negative 6. Okay, now let's do the same thing for the second row. So we have negative 3 minus 1, so we'll get negative 4. In the second column, we'll get negative 6. Third column, we have 6 plus 3, so we should get 9. And then we have negative 9 minus 4, so we should get negative 13 in that last column. And then finally, the last row, we have 1 plus 3, so we'll